Hello, my name is Michelle Cannon, and with me today are my colleagues Roman Munoz and Chelsea Olson-Murphy. We are attorneys with the law firm of Lozano Smith, and it is our privilege to conduct this training with you. Before we get started, we have a few legal reminders.
These materials and all discussions of these materials are for instructional purposes only and do not constitute legal advice.
These materials are copyrighted by Lozano Smith. No portion of this work may be copied, distributed, sold, or used for any commercial advantage or private gain, nor any derivative work prepared therefrom, nor shall any sublicense be granted without the express prior written permission of Lozano Smith through its managing partner. Now let's get started with the Santa Ynez Valley Union High School District Workplace Violence Awareness, Prevention, and Reporting Training.
So we're conducting this training today because it's legally required for almost all employees in the state of California. Specifically, California passed SB 553, which requires employers to establish workplace violence prevention plans to create a violent incident log and requires employee training on numerous aspects of the law. The law is enforced by the Division of Occupational Safety and Health in the California Department of Industrial Relations, also known as Cal-OSHA. And there's good reasons this law exists. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, workplace violence affects nearly 2 million American workers annually. Additionally, according to the Department of Industrial Relations, the latest data shows that in 2021, 57 working people died from acts of workplace violence in California, and many other acts of workplace violence go unreported.
According to the Department of Labor, while more and more information on causes of violence and how to handle it is becoming known, there's often no reasonable rationale for this type of conduct. And despite everything we do know, violent situations happen. No employer is immune from workplace violence, and no employer can totally prevent it.
The cost to organizations is significant, and a single incident can have sweeping repercussions. There can be the immediate psychological and physical repercussions felt by the victim, as well as the victim's family, friends, and coworkers, as well as our students, families, and the entire school community. There are also work impacts such as the loss of productivity, morale, that sweeps through the organization after a violent incident.
The law requires that employees be trained on the employer's workplace violence prevention plan, how to obtain a copy of that plan at no cost, and how to participate in the development and implementation of the plan. The law also requires employees be trained in the definitions and requirements provided in Labor Code Section 6401.9, how to report workplace violence incidents or concerns without fear of reprisal, workplace violence hazards specific to the employee's job, corrective measures the employer has implemented, how to seek assistance to prevent or respond to violence, and strategies to avoid physical harm.
The training must also include information about the violent incident log and how to obtain copies, an opportunity for interactive questions and answers with a person knowledgeable about the employer's plan. Additionally, the employer must provide additional training when a new or previously unrecognized workplace violence hazard has been identified or when changes are made to the plan. Any additional training may be limited to addressing the new hazard or changes.
At the Santa Ynez Valley Union High School District, we take the issue of workplace violence seriously. Our district has adopted a workplace violence prevention plan that provides guidance to employees and identifies procedures for handling issues related to workplace violence, including prevention, identification, and response. The safety of each employee while in the performance of their work activities is a top priority of the district. All employees share a responsibility for promoting a safe working environment. Through the implementation of this workplace violence prevention plan, the district seeks to promote a safe, respectful, and non-threatening work environment for all employees, students, and members of the public.
Remember, violence or threats of violence in all forms is unacceptable workplace behavior. It will not be tolerated, and it will be dealt with appropriately. All employees are responsible and accountable for using safe work practices, for following all directives, policies, and procedures, and for assisting in maintaining a safe and secure work environment. To ensure a successful plan, prompt and accurate reporting of all violent incidents, whether or not physical injury has occurred, is required. The district appreciates your participation and attention in this training. Copies can be obtained at no cost by emailing eLewis@syvyuhsd.org. Later in the video, you will learn about the district's violent incident log and other related materials. All of those can also be obtained by emailing elewis@syvyuhsd.org.
We want to ensure you know how incidents of workplace violence can be reported. In case of emergencies, employees are encouraged to call 911 immediately and to contact law enforcement as needed. When safe, and in all other cases, employees should report incidents of workplace violence to their supervisor, HR, or through the online form found on the district website under Personnel Department on the Workplace Violence Prevention page. The district takes these issues very seriously and encourages the reporting of both incidents as well as concerns. We have and enforce this policy prohibiting retaliation, and we want to assure employees that there will be no retaliation or reprisals for reporting concerns or incidents related to workplace violence.
There are also options for employees seeking assistance in how to prevent or respond to violence. If there is an incident, please report it immediately. If you have any questions related to prevention or need assistance in these matters, please start by alerting Jasmine Day to the incident.
If you have any questions about this video, or if you would like to provide feedback on this training or input on future trainings, please email elewis@syvyuhsd.org. You can also utilize this contact to provide input on the Workplace Violence Prevention Plan. Any questions related to this training will be responded to within 1 business day. Now let's talk about some of the definitions that will help you better understand the new law and the Workplace Violence Prevention Plan. So what is workplace violence?
Workplace violence is any act of violence or threat of violence that occurs in a place of employment. It includes, but is not limited to, the threat or use of physical force against an employee that results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, psychological trauma, stress, regardless of whether the employee sustains an injury. An incident involving a threat or use of a firearm or other dangerous weapon, including the use of common objects as weapons, regardless of whether the employee sustains an injury.
Lawful acts of self-defense or defense of others are not considered workplace violence.
What is a threat of workplace violence under the law? A threat of violence means any verbal or written statement, including but not limited to texts, electronic messages, social media messages, or other online posts, or any behavioral or physical conduct that conveys an intent or that is reasonably perceived to convey an intent to cause physical harm or to place someone in fear of physical harm, and that serves no legitimate purpose.
Here are some additional definitions that may be helpful when understanding the Workplace Violence Prevention Plan. An emergency is defined as an unanticipated circumstance that can be life-threatening or pose a risk of significant injuries to employees or other persons. Engineering controls mean an aspect of the built space or a device that removes a hazard from the workplace or creates a barrier between the worker and the hazard. Workplace practice controls means procedures and rules which are used to effectively reduce workplace violence hazards.
Now we'd like to discuss the types of workplace violence. There are 4 identified in the law. Type 1 is defined as violence committed by a person who has no legitimate business at the worksite and includes violent acts by anyone who enters the workplace or approaches workers with the intent to commit a crime. Type 2 violence is violence directed at employees by customers, clients, patients, students, parents, or visitors.
Type 3 violence is violence against an employee by a present or former employee, supervisor, or manager. Type 4 violence is violence committed in the workplace by a person who does not work there, but has or is known to have had a personal relationship with an employee.
Now let's practice categorizing types of violence with a couple of hypotheticals. Allison, a science teacher at one of the district schools, tells her supervisor that her ex-partner has come to the school parking lot and has keyed her car and punctured her tires. What do you think? What type of violence would this be categorized as? Well, this would be type 4 workplace violence because it is a violent act committed in the workplace. The parking lot is an extension of the campus and was committed by someone who does not work at the district, but who is known to have a personal relationship with an employee.
All right, now let's try another one. Taylor is a former employee of the district. Last year, Taylor was offered the option to resign, but refused, and the district non-reelected him. Yesterday, Taylor walked into the district office to demand his job back. When he was asked to leave, he told the office staff, Let's hope you don't have a school shooting. What type of workplace violence would this be? So assuming this could be considered a threat, this would be an example of type 3 workplace violence because the threat is being perpetrated at a district employee by a former employee.
Now let's discuss the violent incident log. The law requires that employers record information in a violent incident log for every workplace violence incident. The information recorded in the log for each incident shall be based on information solicited from the employees who experienced the workplace violence, on witness statements, and on investigation findings, if any. The employer is also required to omit any element of personal identifying information to ensure there's no identification of any person involved in a violent incident, such as the person's name, address, email address, telephone number, social security number, or other information that alone or in combination with other publicly available information reveals that person's identity.
Let's talk about what information must be contained in the violent incident log. It must include date, time, and location of the incident, the type or types of workplace violence that occurred, a detailed description of the incident. It must identify the classification of the perpetrator, such as a student, a former student, a parent, stranger, supervisor, or other family member, and a classification of where the incident occurred, such as in the classroom, playground, cafeteria, or parking lot. It must also identify the type of incident, including whether it involved a physical attack without a weapon, attack with a weapon, threat of physical force, or threat to use a weapon. It also should classify whether there's sexual assault or threat, or if there was an animal attack.
The log must also identify the consequences of the incident, including whether security or law enforcement was contacted, and the response. Actions taken to protect employees from a continuing threat, and information about the person completing the log, including their name, their job title, the date the log is completed.
In the education profession, many employees have asked whether schools must document all incidents related to special education in their violent incident logs, as many of these incidents involve unintentional acts. For example, a special education student that is tantruming and inadvertently injures her aide.
In this scenario, Cal OSHA has provided guidance that states, regardless of whether the act was intentional or not, incidents involving students should be categorized as a type 2 violence. The employer is required to record it in the violent incident log. However, keep in mind that no personal identifiable information can be included in the log.
The law requires records of workplace hazard identification, evaluation, and correction be maintained and kept for at least 5 years. Training records must be kept for at least 1 year and must include training dates, contents or a summary of the training, the names and qualifications of those conducting the training, and the names of job titles of all people that attended. Violent incident logs must be kept for at least 5 years. If an employee or their representative requests these types of records, they must be made available to them within 15 calendar days, free of charge. Records of workplace violent incident investigations must also be kept for at least 5 years, but they are not subject to these disclosure requirements.
Cal OSHA is currently working on developing a workplace violence prevention standard that meets the requirements of Labor Code Section 6401.9 and will submit it to the Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board, OSHSB, no later than December 31, 2025. OSHSB is required to then adopt the standards no later than December 31, 2026. That means that this training will likely be updated in early 2027, if not sooner.
Safety is a shared responsibility where everyone must participate. The Workplace Violence Prevention Plan provides a framework, training, and procedures for reporting and preventing violence in the workplace.
Remember to stay diligent and observant. Ask questions if you have any, and don't hesitate to report concerns and incidents that you observe. Taking these steps is an important way to ensure that all employees are working together to prevent violence in the workplace.
We appreciate everyone's full cooperation with the plan. Thank you for finishing the training, which is the first step in ensuring a violence-free workplace.